An elderly millionaire was thrown out of a luxury car dealership simply because of his appearance. But when he returned just minutes later, his actions left everyone stunned. James Turner had spent a lifetime defying expectations. At 78, he had quietly amassed a considerable fortune, though few were aware of it. To those who only saw him in passing, he seemed like any other elderly man, his wardrobe consisting of well-worn shirts, simple trousers, and shoes that had long lost their polish. But James had never cared for appearances. To him, a person's worth was measured by their deeds, not their wealth. He lived modestly in a suburban home, following a daily routine that could almost be called monastic. His mornings began with a peaceful walk through the neighborhood, exchanging warm greetings with old friends and acquaintances. His days were filled with simple pleasures, tending to his garden, getting lost in the pages of his favorite books, and visiting his daughter Sophie and his grandson Daniel. Life had not been easy for Sophie, especially after a difficult divorce. But James never believed that money was the key to happiness. He spent it carefully, leading a lifestyle that many would call austere. Few knew that years ago, he had won a massive sum in the lottery. Yet, instead of flaunting his wealth, he had quietly invested and saved it, ensuring it would only be used when it truly mattered. And that moment arrived during one of his visits to the hospital where 7-year-old Daniel was being treated. The boy's eyes always lit up when he talked about cars, and one day, he confided in his grandfather his greatest dream, to ride in a Lamborghini. To Daniel, exotic cars were more than just machines. They symbolized speed, adventure, and most of all, freedom. Seeing his grandson's boundless enthusiasm, James made a decision that would change everything. He was going to buy a Lamborghini for Daniel. Nothing was more important to him than making his grandson's dream come true. It was a simple wish, yet to Daniel, it was the world. On a Saturday morning, James set out on his mission. He chose his best shirt, though even that one bore the marks of time, and stepped out of his house with a determined heart. The idea of stepping into a high-end dealership, a world so far removed from his own, made him uneasy. But nothing mattered more than the joy he imagined on Daniel's face. As he made his way there, James reflected on how little money had ever meant to him. And yet, today, he was about to spend it in the most meaningful way he could think of, on his grandson's happiness. When he arrived, the dealership loomed before him, a striking structure of glass and polished steel. Taking a steadying breath, he stepped inside. James walked in with quiet confidence, his simple attire standing in stark contrast to the gleaming luxury cars bathed in showroom lights. His eyes landed on a Lamborghini, its sleek, sculpted frame gleaming under the spotlights. It felt as though the car had been waiting for him, as though it was meant to fulfill Daniel's dream. Before he could admire it further, a voice cut through the air. "May I help you, sir?" The words came from Matthew, the dealership manager. His polite tone was undercut by the barely concealed judgment in his eyes. Dressed in an impeccable suit, Matthew was accustomed to sizing up customers the moment they walked through the door, and to him, James looked like anything but a serious buyer. But James remained unfazed. In a calm, steady voice he replied, "Yes, I'd like to buy a Lamborghini." Matthew almost laughed. The request sounded absurd to him. "A Lamborghini?" he repeated, as though the very idea was incomprehensible. "Are you sure, sir? These cars are, well, let's just say they cost a bit more than what you might be used to." James met his gaze with unwavering resolve. "I know exactly what I want. My grandson dreams of riding in a Lamborghini, and I intend to buy one for him." For a moment, Matthew said nothing. The silence stretched uncomfortably long, and James could feel the weight of the manager's scrutiny. Matthew glanced around, as if expecting someone to confirm that this was some kind of joke. But when he realized James was serious, his disbelief turned to open disdain. "Look, sir," Matthew said, his voice dripping with condescension, "I think you should reconsider making jokes like this. Our Lamborghinis aren't for just anyone. Perhaps you'd be better off looking elsewhere, for something more appropriate." Every word was laced with sarcasm, the rejection unmistakable. James, feeling the sting of humiliation, straightened his posture. He wasn't about to back down. I'm not joking, young man. I have the means to pay for this car, and I'm ready to make the purchase right now. But James's firm declaration was met with complete indifference. Matthew, already visibly irritated and eager to rid the showroom of the elderly man, took a step forward and motioned toward the exit with a sharp gesture. I think I've heard enough, he said coldly. It's best if you leave before I have to call security. I don't want any trouble here. The words struck James like a slap. A man who had always remained composed in the face of life's challenges now found himself overwhelmed by a mixture of humiliation and sorrow. He wasn't accustomed to being dismissed so callously, especially not when all he wanted was to make his grandson's dream come true. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched his worn-out wallet inside his pocket. With a heavy heart, he turned toward the exit, his steps slow and weary. What should have been a moment of joy had turned into a painful reminder of how easily people judged others based on appearances. Just as he was about to step through the glass doors, a voice called out behind him. Sir, please wait! James turned around cautiously, surprised to see a young man hurrying toward him. Unlike Matthew, this man's expression was warm and genuine, immediately easing some of the weight pressing down on James's chest. It was Lucas, one of the dealership's salesmen. Forgive my colleague's behavior, Lucas said, his face marked with sincerity and regret. He had no right to speak to you like that. Please come back inside. I'd be honored to show you the cars myself. James hesitated. Matthew's harsh words still lingered in his mind, making it difficult to shake off the bitterness of the encounter. But there was something in Lucas's voice, an honesty, a kindness, that made him pause. I don't know, James muttered, still uncertain. Lucas didn't miss a beat. I understand, sir, he replied quickly. But if you truly want to make your grandson's dream a reality, let me help. There's no rush. Let's take our time and look at these cars together. I promise you, this will be a completely different experience. Just then, across the showroom, Matthew's phone rang. His expression darkened as he listened, and whatever was being said on the other end seemed urgent. With a frustrated sigh, he stalked off, leaving James and Lucas alone. James looked at the young salesman carefully. He saw something in Lucas's eyes that he hadn't expected to find in this place, a genuine willingness to help. Letting out a quiet sigh, he gave a small nod. All right, he said. A broad smile spread across Lucas's face as he extended his hand. Great! Let's go, sir. I'm sure we'll find the perfect Lamborghini for your grandson. With that, James followed Lucas deeper into the showroom. The space was filled with rows of sleek, polished Lamborghinis in vibrant colors, each one a masterpiece of design and engineering. The cars gleamed under the lights, their flawless exteriors reflecting years of craftsmanship and innovation. As they walked, Lucas spoke with enthusiasm, explaining the finer details of each model, the power beneath the hood, the breathtaking speed, the advanced technology that set these cars apart. His passion for automobiles was undeniable, and he took pride in sharing it. James listened, nodding occasionally, but his thoughts were elsewhere. No amount of horsepower or high-tech features could distract him from what truly mattered. His mind remained fixed on Daniel, his grandson's excitement, his dreams, and the responsibility James felt to make this moment a reality. He had spent his life believing money held little meaning, but in this moment, he knew it had a purpose. Lucas, sensing the older man's distant expression, paused in his explanation. He studied James for a moment before speaking. Mr. Turner, he said gently, I get the feeling there's something more behind your decision to buy this car. I could be wrong, but this doesn't seem to be just about owning a luxury vehicle. James's gaze lifted to meet Lucas's. The young man had seen through him. James had always been a private man, someone who kept his thoughts and emotions to himself. But there was something about Lucas, maybe it was the sincerity in his voice or the way he truly seemed to care, that made James feel he could trust him. For the first time that day, he felt the need to share the real reason behind his visit. Taking a deep breath, he finally spoke. Lucas, you're right. I'm not just here to buy a car, James admitted. I came here for my grandson, Daniel. Lucas remained silent, his attentive gaze urging James to continue. Daniel is only 7, but he's already been through more than most people face in a lifetime, James said, his voice thick with emotion. He's always been full of energy, always had this deep love for cars, especially Lamborghinis. To him, these cars aren't just vehicles. They're magic. They represent something bigger, something he's always dreamed of experiencing. James paused for a moment, struggling to keep his emotions in check. Lucas could see the depth of feeling behind every word, but he also sensed there was more to the story. Then James spoke again, his voice quieter now, but filled with sorrow. Recently, we found out that Daniel is sick, he said, his words slow and heavy. He was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. It's a cruel, degenerative disease, and it's already starting to take away the things he loves. The doctors say we don't have much time. And all I care about, is making sure he gets to experience this one dream before it's too late. Hearing the name of the disease, Lucas felt a tightness in his throat. He had heard of multiple sclerosis before, but he had never imagined a child suffering from something so devastating. For the first time, he no longer saw James as just a customer. He saw a grandfather fighting against time, doing everything he could to bring joy to a boy whose world was slipping away. Mr. Turner. Lucas started, but his voice faltered. He took a deep breath before continuing. I had no idea. I'm so sorry for what you and your family are going through. James gave a small nod, appreciative of Lucas's understanding. I just want to do something for him, he said. Even if it's just one ride in a Lamborghini. He deserves that moment of happiness. And I can give that to him. Lucas, now filled with a sense of purpose, knew this was no ordinary sale. This was bigger than business. It was a chance to be part of something meaningful, to make a real difference in a child's life. Mr. Turner, Lucas said firmly, his determination clear. I will do everything in my power to help you and Daniel. My mother, Emma, owns this dealership. She needs to hear your story. I know she'll want to help. James looked at Lucas, surprised by his willingness to get involved. You'd really do that for us? Absolutely, Lucas said without hesitation. This isn't just about selling a car. It's about giving Daniel something to hold on to, something to remember. And we're going to make sure he gets that chance. The weight of the moment settled between them. Lucas had seen many customers walk through the doors of this dealership, but none like James. None whose purpose was so selfless, whose desire to buy a Lamborghini had nothing to do with status or wealth, but with love. There was no time to waste. Lucas knew he had to act, and fast. With renewed urgency, he stepped away and pulled out his phone. His hands trembled slightly as he dialed the number, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. This wasn't just about cars anymore. It was about something far more important. After a few rings, the line clicked, and a familiar voice answered. Hello? It was Emma. Lucas, is everything okay? Emma's voice carried concern. It wasn't like her son to call during business hours unless it was something serious. Mom, I need you to come to the dealership right away, Lucas said, trying to keep his composure, though the urgency in his tone was unmistakable. Lucas, what's going on? Emma asked, now even more alarmed. Is there a problem at the store? It's not about the store, Mom. It's something else. There's a man here, James Turner. He wants to buy a Lamborghini, but this isn't just another sale. His story, it's something you need to hear for yourself. Lucas took a breath before adding. It's about his grandson, Daniel. He's sick, Mom. And this car, it's not just a car to them. It means something much more. A silence stretched on the other end of the line as Emma absorbed what Lucas had just told her. She had always trusted her son's instincts, and if he was calling her like this, she knew it had to be important. I'm on my way, she said firmly. Make sure Mr. Turner doesn't leave. I'll be there as soon as I can. As soon as the call ended, Lucas felt a wave of relief. His mother would know exactly how to handle a situation like this. But for now, he had to make sure James felt comfortable while they waited. He returned to where the elderly man was sitting, his posture slightly hunched, hands resting on his lap. James looked deep in thought, his gaze distant, as if carrying the weight of everything that had happened that day, and everything he still hoped to do for Daniel. "Mr. Turner, my mother is on her way," Lucas said with a reassuring smile. "She really wants to meet you and hear your story." James looked up, surprised at how quickly Lucas had acted. "She's really coming? I don't want to be any trouble." "You're not," Lucas assured him, taking a seat beside him. "She cares about what we do here, and I know she'll want to help however she can." James gave a small nod. There was a quiet comfort in Lucas's words, a sense that, maybe, he wasn't alone in this. Sensing that James needed a distraction, Lucas glanced around the showroom and then pointed at one of the sleek, gleaming Lamborghinis nearby. "Mr. Turner, did you know this model right here is one of the fastest we have? It goes from 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. He grinned. "I have a feeling Daniel would love that." James's lips curved into a small smile. "Oh, he'd be absolutely fascinated," he admitted. "Ever since he was little, he's been crazy about cars. He collects miniatures, memorizes model names, he even tells me which years were the best for certain engines." Lucas chuckled, leaning in with interest. "Sounds like a true car enthusiast. He must have an entire collection by now." James's expression softened. "Yes, and every time he gets a new one, he lines them up neatly, admiring them like they're real Lamborghinis." His voice carried both pride and sorrow, the weight of Daniel's illness always lingering in the background. As they talked, the minutes slipped by faster. Lucas kept the conversation going, asking more about Daniel, showing James different models, and even sharing a few funny customer stories to lighten the mood. Slowly, the tension in James's shoulders eased. For the first time since stepping into the dealership, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt heard. Then, after about 30 minutes, the dealership doors swung open. Emma had arrived. Emma entered the dealership with quiet authority, her poised stance exuding both elegance and confidence. Her sharp eyes scanned the showroom before settling on Lucas and James, who were deep in conversation. Without hesitation, Lucas stood and stepped forward to greet her. "Mom, this is Mr. James Turner," he said, motioning toward the elderly man beside him. Emma extended her hand with a warm, genuine smile. "Mr. Turner, it's a pleasure to meet you. Lucas told me about your visit, and I'm here to help in any way I can." James rose slowly, shaking her hand with a grateful nod. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure who else to turn to, but your son has been incredibly kind. Lucas has always had a big heart," Emma said, giving her son a proud glance. Then she turned her full attention back to James. "Now, please, tell me more about Daniel and how we can help him." James took a deep breath, steadying himself before recounting Daniel's dream, his love for cars, and the harsh reality they faced with his illness. His voice wavered slightly, but he pressed on, determined to make every word count. As he spoke, Emma listened intently, her expression shifting from professional attentiveness to something much deeper, genuine empathy. She absorbed every detail, from Daniel's childhood fascination with Lamborghinis to the way the boy's eyes lit up whenever he saw one. "All he wants," James said, his voice thick with emotion, "is to ride in a Lamborghini, just once. And I would do anything to make that happen." A single tear slipped down Emma's cheek. She quickly wiped it away, but the weight of the moment stayed with her. This was no ordinary transaction. It wasn't about selling a car, it was about giving a child a fleeting moment of joy in the midst of a difficult battle. "Mr. Turner," Emma said softly, yet with conviction, "your story has touched my heart. I can't begin to imagine what your family is going through, but I understand how much this moment would mean to Daniel. That's why I've made a decision." James held his breath, while Lucas stood beside him, waiting anxiously. "I want to offer you the Lamborghini at no cost," Emma said, smiling warmly. Consider it a gift, for Daniel. He deserves this experience, and we would be honored to be part of it. James blinked, momentarily stunned. He hadn't expected this, such generosity, such kindness. For a moment, words failed him. Beside him, Lucas's face lit up with pride for his mother's decision. Miss Emma, I don't know what to say. James stammered, still trying to process the offer. There's nothing you need to say. Emma reassured him. This is simply our way of making Daniel's dream come true. I couldn't charge for something like this, not when I know how much it means. James sat in silence, his emotions threatening to overwhelm him. But then, after a long moment, a new resolve settled over him. He looked up at Emma with clear, steady eyes. Miss Emma, he said, his voice now firmer. I can't tell you how much this means to me and to Daniel. But I need to be honest with you. I'm not a poor man. In fact, I'm a millionaire. Emma and Lucas exchanged surprised glances. James continued, his tone calm and sincere. Years ago, I won a fortune in the lottery. But I chose to live simply because I've always believed that money doesn't define who we are. The revelation took both Emma and Lucas off guard. The modestly dressed man before them, who had seemed so humble, so unassuming, was, in reality, a wealthy man who had never let money change him. I understand what you're trying to do, and I'm beyond grateful. James went on. But I insist on paying for the Lamborghini. Not out of pride, but because I want this to be fair. I have the means, and I believe in doing things the right way. If you'll allow it, I'd like to pay the full price for the car. For a moment, Emma was speechless. James's integrity was remarkable. His wealth hadn't made him entitled. Instead, it had reinforced his values. Finally, she nodded, a smile of admiration spreading across her face. If that's what you wish, Mr. Turner, then we'll accept. But please know, this isn't just another sale to us. It's a reminder of what truly matters. Lucas stepped closer, placing a hand on James's shoulder. Mr. Turner, you're an incredible man. Daniel is lucky to have you as his grandfather. James gave a small nod, emotion flickering in his eyes. He had made the right choice, not just in coming here, but in staying true to his beliefs. This wasn't just about buying a car anymore. It was about love, integrity, and the unwavering bond between a grandfather and his grandson. As they finalized the details, Emma and Lucas ensured that everything was handled with the utmost care. They knew this moment would be unforgettable, not just for James and Daniel, but for themselves as well. It was a powerful reminder that sometimes, business wasn't just about transactions, it was about human connection, about making a real difference. With most of the paperwork nearly completed, Emma and Lucas focused on the final formalities. James sat quietly, watching them, still overwhelmed by the kindness and understanding he had found in this place. He had walked into the dealership hoping to fulfill his grandson's dream, but he hadn't expected to find people who genuinely cared. That realization filled him with peace and deep gratitude. I'll grab the last set of documents we need to finalize the sale, Emma said, rising from her seat. I'll be right back. As she stepped away toward her office, the dealership door swung open. Matthew, the manager, strode in, his expression tight with frustration. He had left earlier to deal with a personal matter, one that had clearly not gone well. Irritated and still on edge, he marched across the showroom. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted James sitting with Lucas. His eyes narrowed. Why is that old man still here? Annoyance flared within him. He had made it clear earlier that James didn't belong here, or at least he thought he had. Yet there the elderly man sat, still occupying space in a luxury dealership. Without a second thought, Matthew stalked over, completely ignoring Lucas's presence. A smirk curled across his face. You're still here, old man? He scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. I thought I made it clear, this isn't the place for someone like you. He let out a short, mocking laugh. Seriously, what are you doing? Trying to buy a Lamborghini? Don't be ridiculous. James, who had been sitting peacefully just moments ago, was caught off guard by the sudden hostility. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Lucas started to rise, his expression darkening. But before either of them could say a word, another voice cut through the air like a knife. Matthew. The single name was spoken with such force and precision that the entire room seemed to freeze. Matthew stiffened. He knew that voice. Slowly, he turned around, dread washing over him as he came face to face with Emma. She stood a few feet away, documents still in hand, her expression a mixture of disbelief and controlled fury. Miss Emma, He started, scrambling for an excuse, but the words failed him under her piercing gaze. I heard everything, she interrupted coldly, and I am absolutely disgusted by your behavior. Matthew's mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out. How dare you speak to a customer like that? Emma continued, her voice steady but laced with restrained anger. How dare you mock someone, especially after everything he has shared with us? Matthew's face paled. He wanted to defend himself, to say it was just a misunderstanding, but deep down, he knew there was no way out of this. This kind of attitude is unacceptable. Emma went on, her words sharp and deliberate. I have always believed that every customer deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, no matter how they dress, no matter how they appear. And you, Matthew, have miserably failed to uphold those values. Lucas stood silently, watching his mother take control of the situation. There was a deep satisfaction in seeing Matthew finally being held accountable, but at the same time, there was an undeniable weight in the air. This was serious. Emma took a step closer to Matthew, her eyes never leaving his. I've already received multiple complaints about you, she stated. I've given you chances, more than I should have. But this is the last straw. A heavy silence hung between them before she delivered her final words. You're fired. Now get out of my store. The color drained from Matthew's face. For a moment, he looked as if he wanted to argue, to plead, but there was no room for negotiation. The decision had been made. Humiliated and seething with silent rage, he turned on his heel and stormed out of the dealership without so much as a glance back. The silence that followed his departure was thick and lingering. Emma exhaled slowly, grounding herself before shifting her attention back to James. Her expression softened. Mr. Turner, she said gently, I deeply apologize for Matthew's behavior. He had behaved completely out of line, and Emma hoped James understood that such actions did not reflect the values her family held dear. James, who had remained quiet throughout the entire confrontation, finally broke his silence. I appreciate what you did, Miss Emma, he said softly. You acted according to what you thought was right, and I respect that. However, if you'd allow me, I'd like to make a request. Emma turned to him, curiosity piqued. Of course, Mr. James. What is it you need? I believe in second chances, James replied, his voice gentle. Your son Lucas gave me a second chance today when he called me back into the store and took the time to listen to my side of the story. I'd like you to consider offering Matthew the same opportunity. He may need to learn some kindness, but I truly believe he's capable of changing. Lucas glanced at James with admiration, while Emma took a moment to reflect on his words. She recognized the generosity James was showing, even after everything that had transpired, and this made her respect him even more. If that's what you wish, she said after a brief pause, I'll reconsider. But Matthew will need to prove he's capable of change. James nodded, satisfied with her response. Sometimes, all it takes is someone to show us the right way. With the tension between them now gone, Emma and Lucas returned to the table to finalize the sale. With the paperwork completed and everything in order, they were ready to hand over the Lamborghini to James, ensuring that Daniel's dream would soon come true. Once the sale was finished, the mood at the dealership shifted to one of urgency. Emma, Lucas, and James all understood there was no time to waste. With the contract signed and the Lamborghini prepared, they decided to act without delay. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden light across the city. James, holding the keys to the Lamborghini, felt the weight of responsibility and emotion. As he glanced at Emma and Lucas, who accompanied him to the dealership's exit, he knew they were all ready to follow him to the hospital where Daniel was waiting. Everyone felt the same. This moment could not wait. The Lamborghini, gleaming in the fading light, stood proudly outside the dealership as if it had been waiting for this very moment. The engine hummed softly, its powerful rumble ready to carry James to his grandson. "Let's go now," James said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Daniel deserves this, and we can't afford to waste another minute." Lucas nodded, sensing the urgency in James's words. "We'll follow you, Mr. James," he said. Emma and Lucas got into a second car, prepared to follow the Lamborghini to the hospital. As James drove the Lamborghini through the city, the car glided effortlessly through traffic, its silent elegance demanding attention. The short drive to the hospital felt more like a journey of profound significance to James. His heart raced with anticipation, eager to see Daniel's reaction to the car. When they arrived at the hospital, the late afternoon sun painted the sky with rich, warm hues, setting the perfect backdrop for what was to come. James parked the Lamborghini right in front of the main entrance, his heart pounding with excitement. Inside the hospital, the usual weight of the circumstances lingered, but that afternoon, something was about to shift. With Emma and Lucas by his side, James strode through the hospital corridors, each step echoing with the promise of a moment they would never forget. Upon reaching Daniel's room, they saw Sophie sitting beside her son's bed, holding his small hand. She looked up in surprise as she noticed her father enter, followed by Emma and Lucas. Her face lit up with a mixture of surprise and emotion as she realized something extraordinary was happening. "Dad, what's going on?" she asked, rising to embrace him. James returned the hug, his heart full of love and understanding for his daughter's concerns. "Sophie," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "I was able to fulfill Daniel's wish." He paused, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I brought him a Lamborghini. He's going to get the ride he's always dreamed of." Sophie brought a hand to her mouth, trying to stifle the tears that welled up in her eyes. She understood just how much that wish meant to Daniel, and how much it meant to her father, as well. "You really did this, Dad? You brought a Lamborghini?" James nodded, his emotions rising. "Yes, daughter. It's outside, waiting for him." Daniel, who had been lying down, overheard the conversation. Despite his weakness, his eyes widened with surprise and joy. "Grandpa, a Lamborghini? For real?" he asked, his voice faint but full of hope. James approached the bed, gently taking Daniel's small hand in his. "Yes, my dear. A real Lamborghini, just for you. How about we take a ride?" With the help of a nurse, Daniel was carefully prepared to leave the room. Sophie and James carefully helped Daniel into a wheelchair, while Emma and Lucas waited outside, eager to see the boy's reaction. As soon as Daniel was wheeled outside and caught sight of the red Lamborghini parked in front, his face transformed. The exhaustion that had weighed him down disappeared, replaced by pure, childlike excitement. His eyes lit up like never before, and a wide smile spread across his face. "Grandpa, it's the most beautiful Lamborghini I've ever seen!" Daniel exclaimed, his voice filled with wonder. James, eyes brimming with tears, smiled at his grandson. "And today, it's all yours, Daniel. Let's go for that ride," James said, his voice full of love and pride. With careful hands, Lucas and Emma assisted James in placing Daniel into the passenger seat of the Lamborghini. Despite his weakness, Daniel was completely captivated by the experience. He touched the steering wheel, ran his fingers over the dashboard, and closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to absorb every detail into his memory. James settled into the driver's seat, fastened his seatbelt, and looked over at Daniel. "Ready, champ? Let's go." Daniel nodded, still grinning. James started the engine, and the roar of the Lamborghini filled the air, making Daniel's eyes sparkle even more. They began to drive slowly, with James navigating through the streets, while Daniel soaked in every moment. He marveled at the sensation of speed, the sound of the engine, and the passing scenery. The ride may have been short, but for Daniel, it felt like an eternity. Every turn, every burst of acceleration was a dream coming true, a moment of pure happiness amidst the hardships he was facing. When they finally returned to the hospital, James parked the Lamborghini at the entrance. Daniel turned to him, his eyes still shining with emotion. "Thank you, Grandpa. This was the best day of my life," he said softly, his voice full of gratitude. James took Daniel's hand in his, smiling through the tears that quietly streamed down his face. "I'd do anything for you, Daniel. Seeing you happy is all that matters." As they helped Daniel back inside the hospital, everyone around them could feel the magic of that moment. Sophie embraced her father tightly, silently thanking him for the beautiful gift he had given her son. Emma and Lucas, watching from a distance, were also deeply moved. They understood that they had been part of something truly extraordinary, something far beyond a simple business transaction. That afternoon, a wish had been fulfilled, and a memory had been made that would last a lifetime. The weeks following Daniel's ride in the Lamborghini were filled with both joy and sorrow for the Turner family. The memory of the sparkle in Daniel's eyes, even during that brief moment of happiness, lingered in everyone's hearts. But the harsh reality of his illness continued to take its toll. As the doctors had predicted, Daniel passed away not long after. Grief settled over James, Sophie, and everyone who had known and loved him. Yet, even in the midst of their sorrow, there was a sense of peace in knowing that Daniel's wish had come true. For James, that ride had not been just a goodbye, it had been a gift that he would carry with him always. Emma and Lucas, equally touched by the experience, realized that something within them had changed after witnessing Daniel's story and James's love. They couldn't allow that memory to fade away. They felt compelled to find a way to keep Daniel's spirit alive, not just for the Turner family, but for everyone who crossed paths with the dealership. One day, as the two walked through the dealership, Emma shared an idea with Lucas. "We need to do more than just remember Daniel," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "We need his story to inspire others. Let's rename the dealership in his honor." Lucas, deeply moved by the thought, immediately agreed. "That would be wonderful, Mom," Lucas said. "Daniel's story can continue to live on here, reminding us all of the true value of our actions." With that, Emma and Lucas set to work on planning the change. They wanted the dealership's new identity to reflect the values Daniel had inspired in them: compassion, generosity, and the fulfillment of dreams. Meanwhile, Matthew, who had been fired after the confrontation with Emma, experienced a significant personal transformation. The shock of nearly losing everything, combined with James's act of generosity in asking for a second chance, caused him to deeply reconsider his behavior. He enrolled in a personal development course, determined to improve his demeanor and become more empathetic towards others. Some time later, Matthew approached Emma, not to ask for his job back, but to express his gratitude. "Ms. Emma," he said, his voice humble, "I know I made a lot of mistakes and I deserve to be fired. But Mr. James's kindness really touched me. I just want to thank you for giving me a second chance to become a better person." Seeing the sincerity in his eyes, Emma could tell that Matthew had indeed changed. "Matthew, I'm glad you took that opportunity. It's rare to find people who acknowledge their mistakes and strive to change. Keep it up, and maybe one day we can work together again." As the days passed, the dealership's renovation was finally completed. On the day of the grand reveal, Emma invited James, Sophie, and several friends and customers to the ceremony. Everyone knew that this wasn't just a commercial event, it was a celebration of life and Daniel's lasting legacy. James arrived early, accompanied by Sophie. Both were visibly moved when they saw the dealership's new facade, now proudly displaying the name Daniel Turner Dealership. Beneath the name, in smaller letters, were the words, "Where dreams come true." During the ceremony, Emma took the stage and gave a brief speech. "Today, we are here not only to unveil a new name, but to celebrate the life of a boy who showed us the true meaning of generosity and love. Daniel's memory will live on here, inspiring us all to be better and to help make the dreams of those around us come true." James, deeply touched, stepped up to say a few words. "Daniel was always such a lively boy, and his biggest dream was to ride in a Lamborghini. Seeing that dream come true was the greatest joy of my life. But what happened afterward, with the support of everyone here, showed me that his spirit continues to live on. This dealership now bears his name, and with it, his memory will inspire everyone who walks through these doors." The plaque was unveiled, and the crowd erupted in applause. The words "Where dreams come true" gleamed in the sunlight, perfectly reflecting the essence of what the dealership had become. Matthew, standing in the crowd, smiled as he saw the new plaque. He knew that the experience had changed his life forever. After the ceremony, he approached James once again, thanking him for the chance he had been given and promising to keep working on himself. From that day forward, the Daniel Turner dealership became much more than just a business. It stood as a symbol of hope, the fulfillment of dreams, and the power of second chances. Everyone who entered knew they were stepping into a special place, where the memory of a boy who loved exotic cars continued to inspire kindness, compassion, and the belief that, no matter how tough things may seem, there is always room to make dreams come true. And so, the memory of Daniel Turner lived on, not just in the hearts of his family, but in everyone who heard his story.